A single word, it is the word Iran. When you say today, there are all sorts of question marks. What in the world is going on? How could something like what has happening right this very minute happen? All those questions. I suppose if there's ever been a country we've seen totally change right before our eyes, it has been the government of Iran. What was it like? What's happening today? What's going to happen in the future? We have some guests with us today who are experts in this whole area. We'll talk about Iran, its future, what's taking place, so please stay with me. Glad you joined me today. I want you to meet three gentlemen. Admittedly, these men are on one side of the Iranian question, but it's important that we understand their side. You've heard a lot about the other side. Let's see what's going on from their perspective. I want you to meet Dr. Monashir Ganji. I'm glad you're with me, sir. He is the former Iranian Minister of Education and a special reporter to the United Nations and Economic and Social Development Commissions of Human Rights. I'm glad you're with me, sir.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And then Dr. Habib Monamez. Am I right about that? Monamez. Professor of Political Science at National University, and he's the Secretary General of the United Movement of Iranian National Forces. And then I want you to meet Mr. Faradun Vereshta. Vereshte. I'm close. Who's the former Iranian oil company representative for OPEC. I'm glad all three of you are here. May I ask you some very broad general questions to start, and then we'll get down to specifics. All of you, I suppose, oppose the Ayatollah. Am I right about that?
Quite right.
Quite right? So I want you people, I'm sure they will know right away where you stand anyway, but none of you are a part of his government or want to be associated with his government. Am I right about that? When you think about what's happening in Iran right this minute with all that's going on, are you mad? Are you disappointed? Are you resolved that this is what it's going to be? What are your feelings right now when you think of Iran?
Mad, disappointed, sad.
All the above?
Yes.
Can you believe that happened when you think about it, Dr. Ganji?
I still don't believe that it happened.
Who do you blame when you look back and you see the situation, you see the Ayatollah come in? Who do you blame for that?
It's easy to blame outside forces. I think partly we have to blame ourselves. And then certainly there were forces to whose interest it was to bring about the present chaos in Iran. Who is going to profit from the war between Iran and Iraq?
Who is going to?
The infrastructure of Iran and Iraq has been destroyed. Iran has lost at least $150 billion to $200 billion in way of industrial damage to its oil industry, dislocation, destruction of Abadan refinery. For years, Iran is going to be paying at least, take 10% interest rate of $200 billion. It's $20 billion. So Iran would have to pay for the rest of the time that it would have oil resources only in interest to buy what would be necessary to replace what Iran is losing.
I sense that what you're...
Therefore, who is going to benefit from it? Iran has a neighboring country to the north whose interest has been to bring about chaos.
Are you talking about the Soviet Union?
Certainly, and definitely the Soviet Union is going to...
Do you feel the Soviets brought Khomeini to power?
I don't really know who brought Khomeini to power, but I think the forces, if there were outside forces, which I'm certain there were, if Khomeini was aware of their existence or not, that's another question. But the forces that brought Khomeini to power could not be only Soviet Union, could not be only the Libyans, could not be only the Palestinians. There must be variety of different kind of sources. Mind you, for one, I think the Carter administration, the hodgepodge within that administration, was such that they could not decide what they wanted to do and how to help.
So do you blame Carter?
Unlike most of my compatriots outside who believe that the revolution was brought about by, it was an American design, I don't necessarily think that it was an American design. I think the acts of omission, if not acts of commission, by the Carter administration helped very much to bring about this situation.
Do you think if Carter had been stronger, if he had been willing to do more militarily, do you think it would have ever taken place?
While we are discussing this, let me tell you this. Contrary again to what has been said and is being said outside of Iran, and contrary to what the Shah of Iran, former Shah of Iran, wrote in his memoirs, I, for one, believe that he was never a lackey of the United States, and that he was a patriot, and he had the interest of Iran deep in his heart. But unfortunately, towards the end, either it is his illness or it is his disappointment with what he sees happening in Iran. From what he has said himself in his book, in articles, he seems to have depended very much on the American administration. And he seems to have wanted some kind of moral support, not only moral support. Iran was buying all along, and is buying today, military supplies, industrial supplies from the West. Those days, this is quite obvious, and this has been reported in Senate hearings, the US administration was refusing to provide the regime with riot control methods which are used in Western countries.
So do you see the United States should have moved in and done something, even militarily, to keep the Shah in power?
Not at all.
No?
Not at all.
No?
US didn't have to do that.
You're saying that if they would have given them enough equipment, they could have done it themselves?
The Shah would, you know, again, if you read Mr. Jordan's memoirs, you will see that in one place after the death of the Shah, Jordan and
Hamilton Jordan.
And President Carter had been discussing in that morning. President Carter had said that the Shah of Iran, in spite of all the things said about him, didn't let the Savak and didn't let the military forces to turn against his own people in the last days. That was, in fact, the characteristic of the Shah. Shah was not asking for military weapons to turn it against his own people. What I said, the riot control mechanism and technology which is applied in the United Kingdom, in France, in this very country, those are the things which were not given to him. But that is the water hose, a very strong water hose. You pour it, you have seen it in the movie in places, and you keep the people from getting close to a building and burning a bank, or going into a movie theater and putting movie to a theater on fire.
Dr. Ganji, many people, though, feel that's the reason, I mean, the way the people were treated in Iran is the very reason the Shah finally lost his power, was because of the Savak and the police and the killings and the torture and all the stuff that he was doing to the people then.
I think you were, the night before last, Nightline had a report of how much misinformation and disinformation comes into play in the media.
I saw that myself.
I think you all in this country and in Europe, for 7, 8, 10 years, you played very well into the hands of those who wanted to make of the Shah of Iran a monster.
Are you saying...
And they made of him a monster to the point they did it so well that if you read a book written by Arnold de Borchgrave, the name of the book is Spike. This story, this part of the book, absolutely every American should consider what happened in it. Arnold de Borchgrave, the book talks about a Soviet KGB spy who defects to the United States, and supposedly there is a Senate hearing. In the hearing, there is the fiction, the book is not fiction, all of it. There is a great deal of truth in the book. It talks about a revolution has taken place in Saudi Arabia. So in the Senate, they are asking this Soviet defector, how did KGB managed to bring about the revolution in Saudi Arabia. The man whose name in the book is Borisov. Borisov says, when the revolution in Saudi Arabia happened, I wasn't any longer in Soviet Union. At that time, I was in the United States. I had defected. But I'm more or less certain we used the same tactics as we used in Iran, in Saudi Arabia. Then he says this. He says, for years, we managed, through the Western media, to make of the Shah of Iran the greatest monster, greatest savage, bloodthirsty ruler in the world, to the point that we ourselves did not have to move a finger, and we maintained the closest ties with Iran during all that time. Then he says, one point, he says, to show you how we manipulated the Western press. He says, when Shah left Iran, a recording of his voice was made in Soviet Union. And that recording was passed to East Germany, and through East Germany, through Iranian exiles, to Texas, to a group of Iranian Student Association in Texas. The Iranian Student Association in Texas hands it over to a local station, saying that this is authentic voice of the Shah. When he left the country, he has told his generals, listen to it, to create, even to kill millions of people if necessary, bloodbath in all the streets, but bring me back. The voice, that in fact happened. That voice was passed by some people to stations, and that station gave, from that station, all other stations took it. For three consecutive days, they ran the voice. Fourth day, they came to examine and find out whether it was authentic. They came to the conclusion that it was a fake voice. That is fact. In the book, Borisov says, when we heard that they announced that this was a fake voice, we weren't concerned. The impact had already been done, and the public opinion was convinced that the Shah was a bloodthirsty animal. That is what was done, and I think, as far as the former regime of Iran is concerned, the story of Iran has not yet been told. And Shah, unfortunately, he himself did not do much to open up and help.
I'll give you a chance to tell that story in just a minute. Stay there, please. As you can tell, if you've been watching, these gentlemen feel very deeply about what they're saying and feeling, and I want to make sure that you really understand where they're coming from, all right? So, you know, lots of times we only listen to supposed experts instead of listening to people who are really living it out. Do you follow what I'm saying? We did a show the other day, and a person came to me after and said, listen, that person's written a book about it, but I lived it. And lots of times we want to listen to all the people who are telling us what supposedly is happening in Iran and places like that, instead of seeing the people that are being affected, their lives, their families, their country, and they're seeing these things happening in front of them.
Well, at any rate, I hope that if there is a change, it's going to be changed towards the new Shah. But there's one thing that we have to consider over here, and that is in the last few years, especially because of the war between Iran and Iraq, and the weaponry that has been purchased from the Soviet Union, and you know, with the Russians, when they send in the weapons, the advisors follow. There's been an influx of Soviet advisors and technicians, and they have been spreading their web all over the country, and the infrastructure of the leftist movement and the Tudeh party has been quite strengthened.
So do you see a communist takeover?
It can happen if the West will sit on their hands. It can happen. There's no doubt about it.
What would you like to see? What would you like to see the United States do? What do you think our action toward Iran should be?
The only thing the United States should do is to certainly make it clear to the Soviets
To stay
hands off Iran. That's all the U.S. should do. We don't want the U.S. to do anything else. We'll do the rest ourselves.
We can take care of Khomeini
All
ourselves.
the U.S. would have to do, tell the Soviets, keep your hands off. And I think what will bring the downfall of Khomeini, as my friends have said, is the economic, in addition to all the ugly face of life, is the economic realities of life in Iran.
Do you
They
also
don't
see
have the price of a pound of meat, Richard, today in Iran is at least $8 to $9 if you can find
For
it.
a pound?
A pound of meat.
Good enough.
A pound of chicken in Iran is over $6 and $6.50 if you can find it again. One egg in Iran costs 55 cents. One single egg. So forth and so on. And besides, the basic needs of the population, the regime is no longer able to provide, because most of these things they buy it from outside. Now they don't have the cash flow that they can buy these things and bring it from outside and give it, if they can give it cheap and without anything, without charge to the population. So economic condition tied with the casualties in Iran has suffered in the war with Iraq. Until the time that the Iranian forces were fighting Iraqis in Iranian territory, Iranian people inside and outside were fully behind the war. But since the Iranian forces entered Iraq and the young children are being sent and tens of thousands of our young people are dying as a result of this mania, war mania efforts of Khomeini, certainly the population is no longer supporting him there.
I've got to break. I'll be back and let you finish. Doctor, stay there, please. We may come over there a little bit later, right? Dr. Habib, you were about to say something a while ago, and I want to be sure you
Are
get
we
to say
on?
it. Yes.
I was going to say that you asked me a question about what I think will be the course of the future. And I said that I think that it's going to be based on the principles of constitutional monarchy. And the late Shah's son, Reza Shah II, will be the reigning monarch. Now, there is a lot of things being said these days about the Mujahideen. And these are the people who were mainly responsible for bringing Khomeini to power. And there was a power struggle, and when they were kicked out, they came opposing Khomeini, and now they are doing it very heroically. In fact, a lot of the people who are now being executed belong to the Mujahideen group. The reason why the Mujahideen cannot succeed is because they do not have the support of any organized faction of the Iranian population. In other words, the people in the villages don't support them, the technocrats don't support them, the laborers don't support them, the army doesn't support them, and they don't have any support within the tribes. Because mostly the Iranian people hold them, as well as Khomeini, responsible for what happened in Iran. So they have the courage and the bravery to fight the regime, but because they don't have the support of the Iranian people, they're not going to succeed. The people who are going to succeed are going to be the people who will have the support of the Iranian people.
But their heroism is admired by all Iranians, of all shades of opinion.
Is there an organization that's working to bring the Shah's son back to power? I mean, is that happening?
Yes.
Are you all raising, money? Is something like that taking place? Or?
There are many different organizations which are working within Iran and outside of Iran. Outside of Iran, they are mostly managed by the technocrats who have now found out that, in fact, what has become of the country that they worked for so hard and they were responsible
and they
for
wanted
25.
to see it back.
And they want to...
I understand. Gentlemen, I must thank all of you for being here today. Thank you very much. You have said things which, frankly, I've never heard before. And I appreciate you being here and sharing with us.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Thank you, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Stay tuned for Midday Edition News coming up next.